Good morning, everyone. To kick us off, I'd like to invite our panelists, Mr. Roger Chiu and Mr. Leon D. Cruz. Leon, you had me worried 5 minutes ago. I said, "Where's our panelists?" And you're hiding in the audience. So, the panel is Frosty and Functional. How control towers keep the cold chain running smoothly. So we've got two parts of the conversation here. The conversation around control towers and specifically control towers in the cold chain. Yeah. So if you have questions, please send them on Mentimeter. But before we start off, I'm going to start with you, Leon, because we actually haven't met before today. Yeah. Give us a brief introduction of yourself and what you do and your background, date of birth, your zodiac sign, and what's your favorite color?
Okay, yeah. First of all, good morning to everyone. Yep. My name is Leon. I'm actually the head of production for Duopharma Biotech Berhad, one of the largest what they call pharmaceutical manufacturer in Malaysia. So basically, I lead the entire production department, and during COVID, I've actually set up the ultra cold chain facility logistic from end to end supply for the vaccines. Few of the vaccines that we have actually been worked on. First is on, of course, first government have gave us the Sputnik vaccine, which didn't come in, but we have established the cold chain, and then we also work on SYNOPSIS. So that's on the logistic part. So what do I do by profession? I'm a pharmacist. So I lead the entire plant. So delivery of medications, production of medications, up to all the hospitals in Malaysia. So that's what I do. Zodiac sign, Cancer.
Oh, no, I have an ex-wife who's cancer. Yeah, seriously. But yeah, that's fine. Roger, yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm a Aries. Yeah, so I'm the founder of our SFS Pharma Logistics. So we specialize in pharmaceutical cold chain, doing mostly clinical trials, comparators, vaccines, etc. So during the COVID-19 times, one of my key role was to manage vaccines from US and Europe into Southeast Asia and North Asia, and also during the supply chain disruption, we do manage control towers, so bring raw materials, finished drugs, and other kind of vaccines, again from Europe, US into the Asia Pacific region. So that's what I do for a living. Thank you.
Okay, so to kick us off, Roger, given your experience in cold chain, and I saw one of your LinkedIn posts a few days ago, about how 10 years ago you started SFS Logistics in India, right? And then you got a group of 10 people, I think, together, or a dozen people together in the room. And one of the guys who was in that session 10, 12 years ago is now the MD of SFS Pharma. So, with that, give us your typical example or a definition of what a control tower means. Yeah.
So there's a lot of way you look at control towers. So my definition of control tower is not purely end-to-end visibility, not picking up the cargo from the manufacturer and then tracking the shipments all the way down to the consignee. So control tower is basically you need to look at the order management, match it against the orders from the suppliers, whichever 3PLs is nominated to collect the shipments, check the documentation, is super important. And then at the far end destination, make sure that the declaration done by the custom broker are correct, because the last thing you want is wrong paperwork and then you get a cold chain shipment stuck at customs. And then deal with the various depot to make sure that there's no disruption in the shipments arriving by air or by sea. On top of that, you got to do predictive analysis, because if it's vaccines, you make sure that cargo goes up on the flight. If it doesn't go on flight, you activate your BCP, business continuity plan. If it's sea freight, and you know there's going to be disruption somewhere in the world, and that shipment's going to be delayed by X amount of days, and then all the shipment departed, you need to check whether it's going to arrive on time. You can use technology to track the predictive analysis, and then tell the depot that, hey, this is going to be late by at least a month. Okay, you better activate air freight. So this is the whole spectrum of a control tower in my world.
Okay. So, I was first introduced to the concept of control towers quite a few years ago by DHL. I think I think they were the first 3PL to start selling control towers as a product. Yeah. I mean, you could agree or disagree. Yeah. So, to you gentlemen, what's the main difference between a control tower in the pharma cold chain versus, say, a control tower if you're an automotive manufacturer or a medical device manufacturer? What's the difference?
Okay. Yep, I do agree to my colleague here. He have mentioned on control tower. Pharma control tower is a bit more stringent compared to automotive because you see, when you bring in an automotive part, a part can wait. That means even if there's a delay or something, the part can still wait in the shipment or even in the cargo or the warehouse. But when you bring in a medication or when you bring in vaccines particularly, you see, every vaccines, they will do something that is called as transport validation, or we call the shipment validation. That means, for example, when they brought in the Pfizer vaccines, okay, there was certain amount of time the vaccine can be kept in that cold chain box. For instance, like some of the vaccines, 72 hours. That means you would have to ensure the product from the time it delivers out of the warehouse up to it reached to your cold room, it has to be done within 72 hours. You see, what happens is if it's not done within the time period, the product will have an excursion. So when there's an excursion, you cannot use the particular product anymore already. Because vaccines sometimes they are live products inside. So you have to make sure the environment is conducive for it to maintain the efficacy. So control towers for when I say for pharma is a bit more stringent compared to normal products. So that's why it's a bit important, particularly cold chain products.
Roger, anything to add to that?
No, I think it's spot on for farmers side of stuff.
And I guess also maybe we should also mention clinical trials, for example. Yeah, if you do a blood sample, you go to someone in Klang, you take their blood sample, and you want to send it to the US, for example, to do an analysis. Um, you cannot afford that excursion. Yeah, you have that fixed transit time. It needs to be maintained at a certain temperature, and it needs to get there or somewhere. So let me just do a rough poll in the audience. I'm not going to ask you to stand up and do this gamification thing. Yeah, I don't like standing up. How many of you are familiar with, or how many of you are, this is going to be a trick question, yeah? How many of you are not familiar with the concept of clinical trials? Not familiar with the concept, sorry, not of clinical trials, of control towers, not familiar with the concept of control towers. You need to raise your hand high. Because if you don't raise your hand, I'm going to ask you a question, Marco. Yeah. How many of you are not familiar with the concept of clinical trials, control towers, sorry? Not familiar. So that means Inba, Stephanie, the gentleman sitting here with his arms crossed, familiar with the concept of control towers. Very good. So, in that difference, the temperature excursions, what do you guys think? Do you think a clinical trial or a vaccine control tower is. So, what did you have to do differently, Roger, when you set it up? When you set up a control tower, you obviously started SFS as a general freight forwarder, yeah? So, what did you have to do differently when you were rolling this out?
The first thing is people to train them to understand how to operate control tower, understand the difficulties in managing manually. Okay, and then the next thing, once they understand how control tower works in a basic way, then you input in technology. You cannot run a control tower manually. It's going to kill you. You have to use technology to run the control tower. So we use artificial intelligence to extract from the order management from the client, and then given the shipping documents from the forwarders at overseas destination, including the manufacturers. We will use AI to extract the data, and then we do a data shuttle to match the order management against the actual shipping documents. If it matches, it goes to our system, and then from the system again, we have to go on the compliance. Yesterday we were talking about compliance of all the local regulatory requirements in every country to make sure they have the relevant license to move the shipments into the country. right? So they don't get stuck in the custom, because once you have a temperature deviation, that's it. These are millions of dollars worth of products. So that's how I will set up my control tower today. So today is all fully automated by technologies. 70% technology, 30% still you still need human skills to check things that are A-okay. Mostly on data analytics and predictive analysis.
Okay. So, what software do you use to do this? Is it an in-house software, Roger, or is it something that you bought off the shelf and customized, or is it something that's the software is available out there?
Those IT guys over here, you're going to hit me. So we wrote ourselves. So we use a zero code software technology. We wrote the formulas. Of course, some of the technology out there, like real-time tracking by the air and sea freight, you can track it by milestone, real-time. We integrate that data into our system. So as long as the airline updates that the shipment is ATA, it will automatically upload it into our system. So there's no need for us to do a manual check.
Okay. So, Leon, shifting gears a bit, you are a manufacturer, right? He's a service provider. When you go out there and decide which 3PL to work with, right? Do you go big, small? What's the criteria that you use?
Okay. How? Of course, as a manufacturer, we have logistic team, but we don't have the extent or the expertise of logistic like what I mentioned over here. But how do we evaluate them is we look at their experience first. Have they dealt with a pharma industry or not? Have they dealt with medications first or not? Do they understand what's the transport validation, and do they understand how crucial it is when we work on medications when bringing, because when we were working on bringing in the vaccines, so what I would have to do is I would have to talk to the custom agents to do a pre-clearance. That means the moment the vaccine arrives in the tarmac, it doesn't wait for any clearance. It goes directly into the lorry and straight get out of the by the cargo area. So this kind of things we will, because we were evaluating few of these suppliers also, so we discuss with them in detail to understand if they know how crucial this is or not. Like what Berhad mentioned, it's actually a very very expensive products worth millions there. So we evaluate them based on their experience, based on how much of knowledge they have on pharma. Do they have a transport validation done? Have they simulated any worst case scenarios during the transportation? So these are few areas that we will evaluate.
So, when we run a logistics operation, yeah, I think there's a lot of shippers here. There are also a lot of service providers here. And just yesterday, I was on a call with 3PL at 9 o'clock before we started the conference. And this guy was complaining. We ran an RFQ, and so with 12 3PLs. We ran an RFQ with 12 3PLs, not for much business, for about 25 million US dollars of freight, and we awarded the business to 4 3PLs. So we have round one, round two, round three, and then we awarded it to 4 3PLs. And my criteria was very simple. We gave it to the lowest bidder. So say from Singapore to New York, we gave it to, I'm just using examples here. We gave it to DHL. From Manila to Singapore, we gave it to FedEx, and we gave Sydney to Belgium to FedEx. Oh, sorry, UPS. So, and I just mentioned these names. It's not the real companies. So one of the guys said, I'm very upset. We are such a long partner with you guys, and we see our volume shrinking because all you're doing is assessing us based on price, right? And I said, yeah, because we're being opportunistic. 3 years ago, our business model was different. We were looking at market share, so therefore we had to have service. But this year, we're looking at profitability and EBITDA. So, American companies, every year that the criteria changes. So this year is EBITDA and profitability. So we're just going on price. So asking you as a shipper, to our 3PL friends out there, you said that you assess their capability, their network, etc., etc. How much weightage do you give on that?
Okay, based on real scenario this happened, we evaluated few suppliers, shippers who have experience as well, but they were cheaper in price also. But we went for someone who's higher in price. Okay, we went with someone with higher in price because we look at their global presence. We look at how much of presence they have in the country of supplying the vaccines or country of supplying the medications. Because just to share this with you, when I was working with the Russians on bringing the vaccine, there was long discussions going on during at the time with government and everything. And towards the last, something was keep pondering me like, hey, just ask them and see who's going to pack the products in Russia. It was just to my knowledge on the last day of discussion, the Russian is telling me that you have to come and pack in Russia yourself. And he said he will open a warehouse and keep. And I was like, okay, so how do I do this? So you see, then I had to go to one of the global player who have presence in that country, and I asked them, do you do this for me? Because I cannot travel to Russia and go do it. So then they said, we can do it. So you see, of course, the cost is higher. What we look at is cost plays a role, but in the pharma industry, we really look at the quality and what service can be offered to us. First thing, what we look at is whether the supply, by the forwarder, do they have an insurance to cover the cargo coming in? One of the reason we eliminated one of the supplier was because he could not cover the insurance for the product. So we had to go with somebody who can write that insurance for us with the amount of value that we're bringing in. So that's how we look at it.
But using that example, yeah, Leon, and I'm picking on you because you're only one of two panelists here. Why wouldn't you specify that in your RFQ before you release the RFQ to say that in order to respond to this RFQ, you need to have valid insurance? Why wouldn't you do that?
Okay, we did respond this. We did mention very clearly because we're bringing a cargo worth of 50 million, close to about 50 million. So one of this logistic guy, what he did, he said, okay, we can. And then it was a very tough fight. Okay, his price was cheaper, and he was very confident he can do it for us. Then I went to the next clause. I said, okay, how about insurance? Then he went here, he there. Oh, they're not writing this much, and he made it complicated. You have to take partial insurance from here, partial insurance from here. So you see, when you're taking, it looks okay, but when there's something goes wrong, you have a big issue. So that's why we went to someone who says that, okay, the whole shipment, I will write off the insurance. Anything that goes wrong in this is my responsibility up to your doorstep. So you see, we want that assurance to be given to us. Because if anything goes wrong and later court case and this and that, I can't supply the vaccine to the people and a lot of things will be going on behind. So this global player said, I'll take the responsibility. Any risk is up to me, but anything after the doorstep is your risk.
Thank you, Leon. So Roger, yesterday you said something like, if it's cheap, it's not good, and if it's good, it's not cheap. Was it you who said it? I think one of our panelists said it yesterday.
Not me.
Not you, huh?
Definitely not me.
Okay. So that means you're cheap and good. Okay. Anyway, but how do you communicate this value to your customers, right? Because I think you're right. You don't look at the cheapest, right? Although I do in the scenario that I'm working in now. But how do you communicate this to your customers? Because it's not easy, right? You don't always speak to the right person. You can't put this down in a document because people don't read stuff, right? My RFQ is 16 pages. It covers everything, but I can tell you all these 3PLs don't read it. Well, they're illiterate. So how do you communicate this to your customers?
Yeah, I think I use a case study of the Moderna vaccines that we handle. So we are a small company competing with the global players to move vaccines to Southeast Asia. I won't mention the countries. So the RFQ was given to us to put on the list of things that we have to fulfill. So when I studied the RFQ, the first thing I said, I'm not going to compete on price. The first thing is price out. So what I compete was we show them the route that we're going to take for these vaccines, and then we do very heavy on the risk management, right? And then we also covered very heavily into a business continuity plan in case this thing don't happen. What's the next step? So this is the key thing I focus. And then the last thing I did was pricing. But because we already have a network for the longest time, and we use a lot of technology in our business. One of the key was real-time tracking of the shipments and understanding all the custom processes. And what Leon said earlier, we know which country to use police escort, which country not to use police escort. So because we are able to show up front to a client that we understood this business and we manage risks carefully, and then when it comes to our price, we got it. So I got no clue whether I'm cheap or expensive.
Can I just add on to this? See, this is exactly what we are looking at. See, the point where you mentioned, if something goes wrong, what is your next route? okay, you have got route A, got a problem. So what is your next route? So you give me the sense of assurance that I will get the product as how it is intended to. So if that is given, then price is a secondary matter for us. But in pharma, we look at it. When we're talking about normal tablets you're supplying, that got no issue because that one we will look at price because anyone can just supply the tablets. But when you talk about injectables, which is cold chain, this is exactly what I am looking at. The assurance that this can be done, we have all these mitigations planned in place. Of course, all this comes with a price, and I'm okay to pay the price. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Now, notice there's quite a few questions coming in. That's very good. We want to try and address all of them. So I'm going to switch to questions, 10 questions. What will be the market distribution of cold chain logistics by commodities? I'm not quite sure I understand the question. What will be the market distribution of cold chain logistics by commodities? Do you get that one? Maybe we'll come back to that one. Can we go to the next question? That's an interesting one. Do control towers help to authenticate medication and make sure it's not fake? You answer that, Roger, and then I'll ask Leon what his response to your answer is.
Yeah, Ken, yes and no. So in the 3PL world, my world, I cannot authenticate whether the drugs is fake or not. But I can assure that when I collect a cargo, it's not being tampered. In order to authenticate that the drugs is counterfeit drugs, then you need both the shipper, the 3PLs, and all the other stakeholders. It's either you go blockchain, okay, so that from the source right down to the pharmacy. So when the consumer scan the QR code or barcode, you know that the product is not counterfeit. So the answer is yes and no. It all requires the counterfeit stuff. You need all stakeholders to be involved. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
So is that an expectation you put on your 3PL or your service provider, Leon?
Yeah. The first thing that I've put in is if any temperament of the seal, then we will have to do a further investigation. Like example, once I hire the global player, the first thing I look at is the seal when I receive the product. If there is a temperament of seal, then that product I'll have to send to the lab to test and see if that's actually an actual authentic product or not. So in that testing, if I realize it's not, then like what Barry mentioned, we'll have to call in for a meeting with all stakeholders to discuss, see if there's any discrepancies that took place throughout the whole journey. That's the most important. And as you all know that now, even in pharma, we're embarking on track and trace. Track and trace is the QR system. And by we are also talking to government to put up the database for track and trace for authentication of medication. If you all realize during your COVID time, you all will scan. So all this data is actually stored back in the system where that shows it's actually authentic medication.
Thank you, Leon. Next question, please. As the service provider of the control tower, what are some of the difficulties that you face, Roger, and how have you overcome this, Roger?
If we are the one doing the whole shipments from door to door, it's absolute control. The problem starts that because control tower is a big topic and you're managing global clients who have contracts with other 3PL companies. So it's managing the 3PLs that is challenging. Some 3PLs are very forthcoming, some 3PLs are not. So when we receive the shipping documents or in our world called pre-alerts, sometimes the documents are incorrect, without license, and then asking them to give us the correct license takes days and to receive. And then we got pressure of the shipments by air freight, and then we don't have the documents. Then we need to have customs the declaration in whichever country we are arriving. That's the most difficult part. The rest of the part of our custom declaration, because we are experts in custom declaration, once we look at documents, we know whether it's okay or not okay, or including all the regulatory requirements. So for me, it's always working with the third party. If they are very receptive to work together, collaborative, it's very easy. But if they are hard to work, it can be quite painful.
Okay. Here's another one. Food cold chain and pharma cold chain. Regulations, restrictions, same or different?
I'll take that.
Yes.
Different. So for the pharmaceutical, for general cargo, you're all familiar. It's only one body, custom clearance at custom checkpoint. But for pharma, you have to go through the FDA. So there's two agencies that you have to deal with. Okay. For the food, you don't go through the FDA. You go through the AV. They call it AVA, and another body. Okay. And for food, it's more also sensitive because they want to make sure that the food you bring is not contaminated. So it's either you got to understand about whether you need to do sampling to test, or you need to have tons of documents to prove that the documents are okay, including they allow you to bring the first batch in, and then you got to do a test okay before you bring the other batch. So completely two different animal altogether.
Okay, fair answer. Man, Roger, a lot of these questions seem to be for you, you know. Are there any, but we'll try this one with yourself, Leon. Are there any external parties to evaluate to maintain best practice temperature control for all cold chain businesses? In Malaysia, for example, is there a third party to evaluate or to maintain these best practices?
Okay. In Malaysia, we have a National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Agency, NPRA, we call them, okay? Under that, we have something that is called as GDP, Good Distribution Practice. So under the Good Distribution Practice guideline, there is a specific guideline that you have to ensure certain practices and certain procedures are put into place to make sure that you don't deviate from the procedures and requirement. On top of that, for cold chain, we also have, they call this the WHO pre-qualification guidelines. So as cold chain product or logistics, we NPRA will ensure that we have to abide to that law. If we don't abide to the guidelines, then they would not give you the approval to bring in the cold chain. Because you see, for vaccines product, we will have to get the licensing from NPRA. So part of the evaluation of NPRA is to see if you have the cold chain infrastructure or the partner that you're liaising with, are they capable to bring in the product or not?
So let me ask you this. I've worked in a situation where I work with a 3PL who doesn't have GDPMD or GDP. Okay? But I have GDPMD. So, but I took on the responsibility to work with this 3PL because they're a competent operator and they were cheap. And it was quite successful. So rather than get the 3PL to be GDP certified, I use my own. Is that a scenario that you've been faced with before, or that you would consider doing?
Okay, not every logistic providers are GDPMD certified, but what they look at is your controls in place. It's okay to hire someone who's not GDP certified, but as long as a person that I'm hiring a third party, I must be GDP certified first. But the person that I'm hiring, I have to ensure they have controls in place. See, end of the day, what even the regulators want to see is the assurance that even if I hire person A or person B, they can assure me the end product would be a quality. So that's the main concern over here.
Thank you. This is a question for you, Roger. I should have asked this question myself. You mentioned you use AI in your control tower. What does the AI do, right? And should companies be looking at AI?
That's easy answer. Answer yes. So AI has matured over the years. So in the old days, you have things called OCR, right? You have OCR, then you got robotic process automation. So OCR and robotic process automation, when we do a test, right, in our kind of business, everything needs to be fixed. But the problem that in our business, the drugs names can be complicated and the format can a little bit change. So what we do, we use AI to train the robots to read the documents. So the technology we use is pretty advanced. So about 5 to 10 documents, mostly average about 5 documents. We can the AI will be able to pick up the relevant documents from every fields and then match it against the order. So that's how we use our AI. Number one is to eliminate manual input. It has a freight folder, you got to copy and then paste with the software. This one has a lot of problems.
But sorry, isn't it like OCR?
It's similar to OCR, but it's not. It really the robot actually reads and understands the documents and pull up. I'm not going to go technical because I'm not the expert in that. But I'm in the project. So we pull out the relevant documents, we match it against the order, correct, goes into our software. So that really help us to, number one, eliminate manual copy and paste by the operator, because that becomes like a low entry job. Secondly, as long as human touches copy and paste, it's bound to have either copy wrongly or paste wrongly. Okay, that will disrupt the whole entire control tower. Secondly, checking requires a lot of human skills. Sometimes people do make mistakes. So with robots, you do reference point. they can pick it up and goes into the system. So that's how we use AI. But having said that, AI can only works in this scenario if you're buying from the same supplier, okay, and not always changing here and there, then it's easy to fix on AI. So the other technology we use is of course we use real-time tracking. The technology is available in the market. You can always API easily. And lastly, hot topic for everybody is sustainability. So what you can have a control tower. How do I manage my carbon footprint? And after I manage a carbon footprint door to door, so what? So we have the data to check. Okay, you continuously use this airline. This airline is always not carbon friendly. So with the data, it's your choice as a shipper or consignee. Do you want us to switch airlines or go to a more carbon-friendly airlines? So this is the data that we provide.
So, and you developed the solution or software in-house?
Yes, so it's a combination of in-house. The backbone skeleton is in-house developed, but some of the advanced technology, of course, is from off-the-shelf system, and then we integrate into our system via API.
Okay, thank you. This is more of a statement, I think. Cooperation from various stakeholders need to ensure unbroken cold chains. That is, civil, aviation, or port authority is the key here to drive players to emphasize cold chain process. Everyone, not one. Okay, I agree. Next. What is your view about domestic B2C cold chain logistics? This is a question for both you gentlemen. Is it saturated or is there still abundance of room to grow? So what is your view about domestic B2C cold chain logistics? Is it saturated or is there still abundance of room to grow? I'll start with you, Leon.
You asked me there's room to grow. There's definitely a lot of room to grow. You see, cold chain has becoming more prominent after what I see is after COVID-19, cold chain is becoming very prominent. Cold chain. Many people are going to cold chain. The thing that some of the players, what they can value add is when you do a cold chain, you want to be in the market. You want to do, in the pharma industry, means you want to do B2C. Try to do some extra miles, like you have your validation done, you have your reports done. So, when you engage a pharma for B2C, they would be more than happy to, engage you because you have done partial of your work already. So, yeah, and definitely there's a lot of room to grow, and cold chain has becoming very prominent. Once again, why I say this, you see, even in the medication or the medicine world, from tablets they went to injection. Now from injections, if I think some of you all know, they're moving into something that is called as biosimilars. Biosimilars is something that you need cold chain. Okay, biosimilars are something that is new, advanced cell therapy, stem cell therapy. All these you require certain amount of temperature when you deliver the items. So yeah.
What do you think, Roger, from running your business here? Is there room to grow?
Yeah,
Say no, so that your competition will enter the market.
I'll say yes because I welcome competition, so I got to work harder. Yeah, so there are three ways to look at B2C. So in the world, we call it direct to patient. So during the COVID, right, before the COVID, clinical trials are done. Volunteers go to hospital and then you inject whatever you inject, then you draw the blood, then send to central lab. During COVID, no one will go hospital, right? So they have no choice to do direct to patient. Okay, so clinical trial business dropped because hard to find patient during COVID. But over-the-counter drugs become a hot topic. No one want to go to hospital. Hospital very saturated with COVID patients. So they need to deliver the drugs to the patient, right? Finished drugs. So that's where the last mile courier company exists, right? So most of these shipments are mostly about 15 to 25 degrees Celsius. So it's quite easy to manage. So yes, it's going to be increasingly be very heavy because it's more efficient rather than having people coming to a hospital and saturating the healthcare system. And lastly, the next big one that's going to come to Asia, I think will be the next 2-3 years. It's very heavy in the US and Europe, will be cell and gene therapy. So if someone has a very, disease that's very hard to cure, you will remove the genes from his body, then send it to somewhere, then they mix the special drugs, and then send it back to the person, inject it, and then the person will be much better off than traditional way of thinking. So this is the three particular growth that you should look at. Especially for last mile company, you may want to look into delivering drugs to the homes, that's going to happen.
So let me ask you this. You know, we've got some students here from a couple of universities, right? So yesterday we heard Marco talk about halal supply chain and halal logistics. I found it quite interesting, you know, the opportunities out there. So it's almost like advertising to the students. When you graduate from school, you might want to consider a specialization in halal supply chain, okay? Which is very interesting. You are now the two poster boys, okay? That's all I could find. You're the two poster boys for cold chain and control tower supply chains. What would you tell students out there who are graduating with a degree in supply chain management or logistics, why they should look at your industry as the industry to be in?
Okay, probably I'll take up this one. See, the number of patients, I just take a simple example, okay? Statistics shows about diabetic. Okay, last time you have in a 1 in 10 will have a diabetic normally ratio, but now it's considered 6 to 10. That means in a pool of 10 people, at least 6 people will have been diabetic. And people are moving from tablets to injection. So you see, what I'm trying to say is the number of patients is increasing, the need for medication is becoming more, the need for personalized therapy, like what Roger just mentioned, advanced cell therapy, stem cell therapy, they are all coming. So when you are graduating in a logistic business, one thing you should always keep yourself at par. Be it you're in the food industry, be it you're in the pharma industry, you must know what the industry needs. We cannot, you see, you have to constantly grow. If today you're doing this, tomorrow you have to say, what is the reason requirement by this industry? So you keep yourself competitive in the market. And then when you offer people your services, it's an added advantage that people may feel like, okay, this guy knows stuff, this guy is good. So they give that assurance to us. So that's something very important that for all the students, keep yourself updated. Logistics is a big business. Be it e-commerce, be it you're talking about doing B2B, B2C or things like this, cold chain, non-cold chain, everything has a certain guideline requirement. So keep yourself updated. Then you would know, you would be competitive in the market. That's all I can say. Yeah.
Roger, anything to add to that?
Oh, yes, definitely. So I got a call on a Saturday, noontime, from UK, that I need to send special drugs to Hong Kong by 6 o'clock on a Sunday, 6 p.m. If that drug fails to reach the patient will be gone off. Because all kind of medicine that they try to administer to this patient really doesn't work. So someone has this drug, experimental drugs in UK that can potentially, give a last hope. But that drug needs to be delivered by 6 p.m. But I got a call on a Saturday noontime. Okay, I worked my whole Saturday, my ass out, to get this shipment in temperature control 2 to 8 degrees all the way to Hong Kong, clear custom and delivered to the patient. When I was told by my Hong Kong team that we delivered by 4 o'clock, I really feel like, I've done something great in my life. So this is the reason why you should come to our industry. You're saving lives. Every medicine that you send, you're saving somebody's life. It can be your own family. That brings me a lot of satisfaction.
Roger just speak my mind.
We don't have an award for you today, Roger, but that will have to do. Okay. So related to that, and I realize we're out of time. How influential do you see supply chain leaders in influencing the leadership teams or board in terms of logistics costs, Leon? How influential do you see your arguments that it's not just about cost, it's about the ability, the service levels and ability to deliver? Is this something that you see your company is willing to explore or not explore, willing to consider and decide upon?
Yes, I would say yes, okay, because it also depends on the other end, the person who's giving you business. They must understand that everything is not cost. Remember, you see, when you pay a certain amount of price, you pay for a premium. So you pay for a certain amount of assurance and safety. So the person who gives the business or watch the business must understand that everything doesn't, you can take a cheap supply, but in the event something goes wrong, how are you going to manage this? So everything comes with a cost, and what is important is the other end, they must understand what you're working with first. That's very, very important. You cannot just apply the same rule, I want cheap cost for this, I want cheap cost for that. It doesn't work like that. It's not like a pasar malam. Okay, you have to make sure that, okay, if this is given by the vendor, there is a certain amount of work behind and there is a cost for it. So it's very, very important.
Thank you, Leon. So the two of you have been a great panel. We're the smallest panel, but we're one of the better panels. Yeah. 30-second takeaway, Roger, and then followed by you, Leon, to the audience.
Yeah, so for all the logistics professionals over here, regardless of whether you do cold chain pharma or cold chain food or whatever, you got to really look into your company business and look at what is the niche market for you, and then be very good at it and make sure that you have a competitive advantage against the rest, and really focus very heavy into digitalization. That is a given. So it's a must. Sorry. And also, if you're not into sustainability, start working on it right now. It's going to be a requirement.
So digitalization and sustainability. Yeah. Thank you,
That's
Roger.
correct.
Leon.
Yep. For all the logistics provider over here, I would say pharma logistics is still, it's not up to a par. I would appreciate, we have less competitors, I would say. Okay. Come in, get up, join this pharma market, because supplying to Sabah and Sarawak to the interior side has always been a challenge for us. So I feel there's a lot of way for you all to improve this logistic business, which, like what Roger mentioned, you're saving life.
So key takeaway, ladies and gentlemen, sustainability and digitalization is necessary, and there's a lot of opportunity and room for growth in this segment of supply chain. With that, ladies and gentlemen, please round of applause for our two panelists.